The wagon wheel splintered against the rock with a crack that echoed through the Colorado mountains, and Willow Foster knew she was hopelessly, impossibly lost. Again. She stared at the broken wheel, then at the trail that wound through the towering pines in 3 different directions, none of which looked remotely familiar despite having passed through this area only 2 hours ago. Or was it 3 hours? The sun was already dipping toward the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, and she had absolutely no idea which direction would lead her back to Fairplay. The map her father had drawn lay crumpled on the wagon seat, smudged with dirt and completely useless in her hands. She could read the words perfectly well, but the actual landscape refused to match the neat lines and careful notations he had made. A sound from the general store back in town echoed in her memory. That Foster girl could get lost in her own bedroom, old Mrs. Henderson had said, her voice carrying through the open door. Send her to fetch water from the well out back and she will end up at the livery stable somehow. The laughter that followed had stung, but Willow could not argue with the truth of it. She had been born in 1856 in a small settlement in Kansas, and her family had moved to Colorado Territory in 1872 when she was 16, seeking better prospects after the railroad expanded westward. Now, at 20 years old in this year of 1876, she had mastered reading, writing, arithmetic, and could bake bread that made grown men weep with joy. But put her on any trail, any road, any path, and within minutes she would be traveling confidently in entirely the wrong direction. Her father ran a small freight business, and she had begged him to let her make deliveries. She was strong enough to handle the wagon, good with the horses, and genuinely wanted to help. He had finally relented this morning, giving her the simplest possible route. Take 3 crates of mining supplies to the Murphy claim, 5 miles northeast of Fairplay, then come straight back. She had set out at dawn, full of determination. She had found the Murphy claim without too much trouble, mostly because she had simply followed the creek like her father instructed, and water only flows one direction. But on the return journey, she had spotted what she thought was a shortcut, a narrow trail that seemed to head back toward town. 2 hours later, she was deeper in the wilderness than she had ever been. The wheel was broken, and the shadows were growing longer by the minute. Willow unhitched the horses, her hands working automatically through the familiar task, while her mind raced through her options. She could try to walk back, but which direction? She could wait here and hope someone came looking for her, but her father would not expect her back until sunset, and by then it would be too dark to search. She could try to fix the wheel herself, but even if she managed it, she would still have no idea which trail to take. The temperature was already dropping. September in the Colorado high country meant warm days but frigid nights, and she wore only a simple brown work dress and a light shawl. Her supplies consisted of half a canteen of water, a piece of cornbread wrapped in cloth, and a completely useless sense of direction. A branch snapped somewhere in the forest behind her. Willow spun around, her heart suddenly hammering. Bears were common in these mountains, mountain lions too. And there were other dangers, the kind that walked on 2 legs and were just as predatory. 3 weeks ago, a woman traveling alone had been robbed on the road between Fairplay and Alma. The men had taken everything she had and left her to walk back to town in her undergarments. Another sound, closer now, deliberate footsteps crunching through the undergrowth. She grabbed the only weapon available, a heavy iron rod used for wagon repairs, and held it in front of her with both hands. Her palms were already sweating despite the cool air. The man who emerged from the tree line was the biggest human being Willow had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the forest behind him. His arms were thick with muscle, visible even beneath the worn buckskin shirt he wore. Dark brown hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a strip of leather, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He carried a rifle with the ease of someone who had been born holding one, and a hunting knife hung from his belt in a beaded sheath. His eyes, she noticed with a strange detached clarity, were the color of pine needles, green with flecks of gold. Those eyes took in the scene quickly, the broken wagon, the unhitched horses, and Willow herself, standing there with her makeshift weapon raised like she had any chance of defending herself against a man who looked like he could snap trees with his bare hands. "That rod won't do you much good against a bear," he said. His voice was deep, rough from disuse, but not unkind. "It might do well enough against a man," Willow replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile beneath the beard. "Might if you knew how to swing it. You are holding it wrong, and you are also about 15 miles from Fairplay, if that is where you were trying to go." 15 miles. Her stomach dropped. That's impossible. I've only been traveling for a few hours. In the wrong direction. He lowered his rifle, resting the butt against the ground, a gesture that seemed designed to appear less threatening. You are headed deeper into the mountains. Keep going this way. You will hit the Continental Divide in about 2 days. Beautiful country, but not real hospitable come nightfall. Willow slowly lowered the iron rod. I was just trying to get back to town. Clearly. He walked past her to examine the broken wheel, moving with surprising quiet for such a large man. This is not going to roll anywhere. You hit that boulder pretty hard. I did not see it. Were you not watching the trail? I was watching the trail. I just thought this was the right trail. Willow felt heat rise to her cheeks. I got turned around after leaving the Murphy claim. He looked up at her, and she saw understanding dawn in his green eyes. You are lost. I am not lost. I know exactly where I am. I'm standing right here. That almost smile again. But you do not know where here is in relation to anywhere else. That is essentially the definition of being lost, yes. She crossed her arms, defensive. Go ahead and laugh, everyone else does. But he did not laugh. Instead, he straightened up, studying her with an expression she could not quite read. What is your name? Willow Foster. My father runs Foster Freight. I know Tom Foster, good man. He held out a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she shook it. His palm was calloused and warm, and completely engulfed her smaller hand. Ryder Thorne, I have a cabin about 3 miles from here. Well, 3 miles as the crow flies, probably 5 by the trails. I have heard of you, Willow said slowly. The mountain man who lives somewhere in the high country, who came into Fairplay maybe twice a year to trade furs and buy supplies. People spoke of him as a ghost, a legend, more animal than man after so many years in the wilderness. Looking at him now, she could see how the legend started. He seemed almost too large, too solid, too wild to be entirely civilized. People say you have been up here for years. 8 years. He turned back to the wagon. I can get your horses back to town. Let your father know you are safe. But it is too late to move this wagon tonight, and too late for you to walk back. You will stay at my cabin, and in the morning I will fix your wheel and guide you home. Every instinct screamed that going anywhere with a strange man, especially one who lived alone in the wilderness, was dangerous. But staying here alone was equally dangerous, and something about Ryder Thorne made her think he was telling the truth. Maybe it was the straightforward way he spoke, with no flattery or false charm, or maybe it was simply that if he meant her harm, he could have done it already without offering explanations or assistance. How do I know I can trust you? She asked. You do not. He started gathering the reins of her horses. But your choices are trust me, or spend the night out here alone, and I can tell you from experience that the wolves have been active lately. Found tracks near my place just yesterday. Big pack. Wolves. Of course there were wolves. All right, Willow said, but I need to bring the money box from the wagon, and I am keeping this. She held up the iron rod. Fair enough. He handed her one set of reins while he took the other. Can you walk 5 miles? I can walk just fine. It is the knowing which direction to walk that causes problems. This time he did smile, a real one that transformed his harsh features into something unexpectedly warm. Then I will make sure you do not need to worry about direction. They set off into the forest, Ryder leading the way with confident strides, while Willow followed, leading one horse while he led the other. The iron rod was clutched in her free hand, though she was beginning to suspect she would not need it. True darkness was falling now, the last light fading from between the trees. But Ryder moved through the shadows like he could see perfectly. He did not hesitate, did not pause to check his bearings, just walked with the absolute certainty of a man who knew every tree and stone in these mountains. How do you know where you are going? Willow asked after they had walked for what felt like an hour. I cannot see the trail anymore. There is no trail here, not a real one anyway, just game paths and my own routes. He held a low-hanging branch aside so she could pass underneath. You learn the land after enough time. That peak there, the one that looks like a broken tooth, that is Mammoth Ridge. My cabin sits in a valley on the east side. As long as I keep that peak on my right, I'm going the correct direction. But how did you know which peak it was in the dark? Saw it before the sun went down, and I can feel the slope of the land beneath my feet. We are walking downhill now, slightly east. The valley runs east-west. It seemed like magic to Willow, this absolute confidence in his own position. She had never in her life felt that kind of certainty about where she was. Even in Fairplay, a town she had lived in for 4 years. She sometimes turned the wrong direction when leaving the general store. "Does everyone find navigation this easy?" she asked. Ryder glanced back at her. "Most people, yes. You really cannot tell which direction you are traveling?" "Not even slightly. I know the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, but by the time I figure out which one I am looking at, I have already gotten confused about which direction I was facing before." She sighed. "My father says my internal compass must be broken. But you found the Murphy claim going out. I followed the creek. That was simple. So you can follow clear landmarks. If they are very clear and very obvious, yes." They walked in silence for a while longer. The air grew colder, and Willow pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her feet ached in her work boots, and she was intensely aware that she was alone in the wilderness with a man she did not know, walking toward a destination she could not find on her own. Every instinct said this was foolish, dangerous, exactly the kind of situation young women were warned about. But Ryder had not touched her, had not leered or made suggestive comments. He had simply offered practical help and then led the way, occasionally pointing out obstacles in her path or holding branches aside. His rifle remained slung across his back, unthreatening. "There," he said finally, pointing ahead. "See the light?" Willow squinted into the darkness and saw a faint warm glow between the trees. As they drew closer, a cabin materialized out of the shadows, solid and well-built, with glass windows and a stone chimney from which smoke rose in a steady stream. It was larger than she had expected, clearly the work of someone who intended to stay, not just a temporary shelter. Ryder led the horses to a small corral beside the cabin where 2 other horses were already settled for the night. He worked quickly, removing their tack and making sure they had water and feed. Willow stood awkwardly, holding her iron rod and money box, feeling completely out of place. "Come inside," Ryder said, gesturing to the cabin door. "It is cold out here." The interior of the cabin was warm and surprisingly clean. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the log walls. There was a table with 2 chairs, a bed frame built into one corner with what looked like a real mattress, shelves lined with supplies and books, and even a small stove for cooking. Furs and hides hung from the rafters, and the whole place smelled of wood smoke and pine. "You can sleep in the bed," Ryder said, already pulling blankets from a chest. "I will take the floor." "I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will. I have slept on worse." He spread the blankets near the fire, creating a bedroll that looked comfortable enough. "Are you hungry? I have venison stew from yesterday, still good." Willow realized she was starving. The cornbread was long gone, eaten during her confused wandering. "Yes, thank you." He ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls and set them on the table, then sliced thick pieces of bread from a loaf. They ate in silence at first, Willow too hungry to make conversation, but as her immediate needs were met, she found herself studying her host more carefully. Ryder Thorne was probably around 30 years old, though the beard and weathered skin made him hard to judge. His hands were scarred from years of hard work and wilderness living, but they moved with precision and care. He ate neatly, with better manners than she would have expected from a man who lived alone in the mountains. And there were those books on the shelves, at least a dozen of them, well worn from reading. "Why do you live up here?" she asked finally. "Alone?" He was quiet for a long moment, chewing thoughtfully. "I came west in '68 with the army. Did some scouting, some fighting, things I'm not proud of now." He stared into his bowl. "After my service ended, I could not go back to cities, to crowds, to noise. Tried it for a while in Denver, felt like I could not breathe. So I came up here, built this place, and found I preferred my own company to most people." "That must be lonely." "Sometimes." He looked up at her. "But peaceful. No one expects anything from me here. No one judges or gossips or demands explanations." Willow thought about the laughter in the general store, the way people smiled and shook their heads when they saw her coming. "That does sound appealing. You get that a lot? The judgment?" "Every day." She pushed stew around her bowl. "I am 20 years old, and I still need someone to walk me places because otherwise I will end up on the wrong side of town. Do you know how humiliating that is? I am not a child. I am perfectly capable in every other way. But this one thing, this one simple thing everyone else can do without thinking, I just cannot manage." "It is not simple," Ryder said. "Navigation takes skills most people do not realize they are using. reading landscapes, tracking the sun, maintaining an internal map of where you have been. Your brain just does not work that way, does not make you less capable, just means you need different strategies, like always having someone guide me, like knowing your limitations and planning accordingly. I cannot read or write very well. Letters jump around on the page, make no sense. Took me years to even learn to sign my name properly. Does that make me stupid? Willow blinked in surprise. No, of course not. Then why does your navigation problem make you less? She had no answer for that. No one had ever framed it that way before. It was always presented as a failure, a flaw, something she should be ashamed of and try harder to overcome. But Ryder spoke of it like it was simply a fact, no more important than being tall or short, dark-haired or fair. They finished eating, and Ryder heated water for washing up. Willow helped clean the bowls and put things away, falling into an easy rhythm despite being in a strange place. When everything was tidy, Ryder banked the fire and gestured to the bed. There is an extra blanket in that chest if you get cold. I am a light sleeper, so if you need anything in the night, just speak up. Thank you, Willow said, for all of this, for helping me. No need for thanks. Could not leave you out there. He settled onto his bedroll, his large frame somehow fitting into the space with practiced ease. Sleep well, Willow Foster. She climbed into the bed, which was surprisingly comfortable, and pulled the heavy quilts up to her chin. The cabin was warm, and the bed was soft, but her mind raced. She was sleeping in a strange man's cabin, miles from town, with no way to find her way back alone. By all rights, she should be terrified, but instead, she felt safe. Morning came with pale sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee brewing. Willow sat up to find Ryder already awake, dressed and preparing breakfast. He looked over when he heard her stirring. Morning, coffee is ready. Figured we should eat before heading to your wagon. They had a breakfast of cornmeal mush and dried apples, both of them eating quickly. And then Ryder gathered tools and supplies while Willow tidied herself as best she could. Her dress was wrinkled and her hair was escaping its braid, but there was nothing to be done about it. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had spent the night in the wilderness. The walk back to the wagon took less time in daylight, though Willow still had absolutely no idea where they were. Everything looked the same to her, just trees and rocks and more trees. But Ryder moved with purpose, never hesitating, and eventually they emerged onto the trail where her wagon still sat with its broken wheel. He set to work immediately, and Willow watched in fascination as he assessed the damage, selected tools, and began repairs. His movements were efficient and practiced, those large hands working with surprising delicacy. Within an hour, he had fashioned a temporary fix that would get the wagon back to town. This will hold for the trip back, but you will need a proper wheelwright to do a permanent repair, he said, wiping his hands on his buckskin pants. Now comes the important part. Do you know which direction is fair play? Willow looked around at the 3 trails branching off from this spot. Absolutely not. All right, see that trail there, the widest one? That heads northeast back toward the Murphy claim. This one here, with the broken pine across it that goes northwest, deeper into the mountains. And this one, the one you need, goes southwest back to town. But how do you know? They all look the same. Look at the sun. Where is it right now? Willow squinted upward. There, above those trees. That is east, since it is morning. Now, if east is there, which direction is that trail? He pointed to the one he said went to town. I have no idea. Ryder studied her for a moment, then tried a different approach. Do you know what direction fair play is from here, generally? Southwest, you said. Right, so we need to head toward the afternoon sun, but not directly at it, more to the left. He walked over to the correct trail. This one goes downhill. Town is at a lower elevation than we are now. And see these ruts? This is a traveled road. The other 2 are just game trails. Willow examined the trails more carefully. Now that he pointed it out, she could see differences. But she knew with absolute certainty that if she were alone, she would not remember any of this. The information would slip away the moment she tried to use it. I still would not know, she admitted. Then I will take you back. You do not have to do that. If you just point me in the right direction. Willow. He said her name gently but firmly. If I point you in the right direction and you get lost again, I will spend the rest of the day worrying about whether you are safe. Let me take you home. It is not a hardship. So they hitched up the horses. Ryder checked the temporary wheel repair one more time, and they set off down the trail toward Fairplay. Willow drove the wagon while Ryder rode one of his horses alongside, close enough to talk. "How did you end up working for your father's freight business?" he asked as they traveled. "Most women in town are doing laundry or cooking or working in the hotels." "I wanted to do something more," Willow said. "I love my father, but he's not getting any younger and the business is hard on him. I thought if I could help with deliveries, he could focus on managing things, dealing with customers. I am strong enough for the work." "You are," Ryder agreed. "Saw you unhitch those horses yesterday like you have been doing it your whole life. I have been around horses since I was a child. They make sense to me. I can read their moods, understand what they need. It is just directions that confuse me." "Everyone has their strengths." He guided his horse around a fallen branch. "I can track a deer for 3 days across bare rock, but I cannot do arithmetic to save my life. Had to buy a slate and practice for months just to calculate prices when I sell furs." "Really?" "Really. We all have things that come hard. Trick is not letting it define us." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Willow found herself relaxing into the journey. With Ryder beside her, she did not have to worry about which fork to take or whether she was heading the right direction. She could just focus on driving the wagon, enjoying the cool morning air and the beautiful mountain scenery. "Can I ask you something?" she said eventually. "Go ahead." "Yesterday when you found me, you did not laugh. Everyone else laughs when they hear about my direction problems. But you did not. Why?" Ryder considered the question carefully. "I have spent 8 years in these mountains watching animals, studying how they survive. Some animals are nocturnal, some are not. Some can climb, some cannot. Some have sharp eyes, some rely on smell. None of them are worse than the others, just different. They each survive by using their own strengths." He looked over at her. "You have strengths, Willow. I can see that. Getting lost does not erase everything else you are." Something warm bloomed in Willow's chest at his words. She had spent so much of her life being defined by her one weakness, having it pointed out and laughed about, that she had almost started to believe it was all she was. But Ryder saw her differently. He saw her as whole, capable, just with one particular challenge. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. "It is just the truth." They continued on, the trail gradually widening and showing more signs of regular travel. After another hour, familiar landmarks started appearing, ones even Willow recognized. The distinctive rock formation called Eagle's Head, the lightning-struck pine that stood alone in a meadow, and then, finally, the first buildings of Fairplay came into view. The town was small but growing, built around mining interests in the area. A main street ran through the center with businesses on either side: general store, saloon, hotel, blacksmith, and her father's freight office. Beyond that were scattered homes and the structures of people trying to build permanent lives in this rough territory. Ryder guided her directly to the freight office, where her father was standing in the doorway, clearly watching for her return. His face sagged with relief when he saw the wagon, then registered surprise when he noticed Ryder riding alongside. "Willow, thank God, I was about to organize a search party." Tom Foster hurried over as they pulled to a stop. He was a solid man in his early 50s, with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent his life working outdoors. "What happened? You should have been back yesterday afternoon." "I got lost, Papa." Willow climbed down from the wagon, broke a wheel and ended up in the high country. Mr. Thorne found me and helped. Tom turned to Ryder, who had dismounted and was standing quietly to the side. "Ryder Thorne, I heard you were up in those mountains. I'm grateful to you for bringing my daughter home safe." "No trouble," Ryder said. "She was handling things well enough when I found her. Just needed help with the wheel and navigation." "Navigation?" Tom sighed. "Willow, I told you to follow the trail straight back." "I thought I was following the trail straight back. It looked right." "It looked right to you, but it was leading 15 miles in the wrong direction," Tom said, but his tone was more worried than angry. "Sweetheart, maybe this is not the job for you." "Papa, please, I can learn better routes. I can be more careful." "You cannot learn directions that you cannot see. We have been over this 100 times. Tom ran a hand through his graying hair. "I cannot have you getting lost every time I send you out. It is too dangerous." Willow felt tears prick at her eyes but refused to let them fall. She had been so sure she could do this, could help her father, could be useful. But he was right. Yesterday proved that. She had managed to get lost on the simplest possible delivery. What if she were not alone? Ryder's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Both Willow and Tom turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Tom asked. I mean, Willow is capable of driving, managing horses, handling freight. She just cannot navigate. So what if someone navigated for her? Ryder shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable with the attention. I know every trail in these mountains. I could ride with her on deliveries, make sure she gets where she's going and back again safely. You would do that? Tom looked skeptical. You barely come to town twice a year. I'm looking for ways to earn some additional income beyond furs. Winters are getting harder, fur prices are dropping. Guiding work would be useful. Ryder glanced at Willow. And I do not mind the company. Willow's heart was suddenly racing. The idea of Ryder riding beside her on deliveries, being there to guide her, to keep her safe, it made the impossible seem possible again. But Tom was frowning. I appreciate the offer, but I cannot afford to pay 2 people for 1 delivery route. Then pay her and give me a percentage of the freight fees. 10% seems fair for guide work. 10%? Tom calculated in his head. That might work, actually. But this is a regular commitment. Multiple deliveries a week, sometimes on short notice. I can manage that. And you would be responsible for her safety. Willow is my only child, Ryder. If anything happened to her, I understand. Ryder's voice was steady, serious. I give you my word I will keep her safe. Tom studied the mountain man for a long moment, then looked at his daughter. Willow, what do you think about this arrangement? I think I would like to try, Willow said, trying to keep the eagerness out of her voice. If Mr. Thorne is willing to help, I would like to try. Ryder, the mountain man corrected. Just Ryder. If Ryder is willing to help, Willow amended. Tom rubbed his jaw, thinking. Finally, he nodded. All right. We will try this for a month. If it works, we continue. If not, we revisit the arrangement. Fair? Fair, Ryder agreed. Fair, Willow echoed, relief flooding through her. They spent the rest of the morning working out details. Tom had a delivery scheduled for the next day to a mining camp west of town, and Ryder agreed to meet Willow at the freight office at dawn. He would need to retrieve some of his gear from his cabin, but he could make it back by morning. As Ryder prepared to leave, Willow walked him to his horse. Thank you, she said quietly. You did not have to offer to do this. I know. He swung up into the saddle with easy grace. But I meant what I said. You have a good head for the work, just need help with navigation. No reason you should not be able to do this. Everyone else thinks I am foolish for trying. Everyone else is not spending half their life alone on a mountain. He gathered the reins. See you tomorrow morning, Willow Foster. She watched him ride out of town, his broad shoulders straight and confident, moving through the world with that absolute certainty of direction she envied so much. Already people were staring and whispering. The mountain man had come to town, had brought back Tom Foster's daughter, and now apparently he would be working with her. The gossip would be everywhere by nightfall. Let them talk, Willow thought. For the first time in years, she felt hope about her future. The next morning, Willow was at the freight office before dawn, loading crates and checking the wagon, which now had a properly repaired wheel thanks to the wheelwright. She wore her best work dress, which was still plain brown cotton, but at least clean and pressed, and had braided her dark blonde hair neatly. She told herself this was normal preparation for a workday, nothing to do with the fact that Ryder would be there soon. He arrived just as the sun was touching the eastern peaks, riding a sturdy bay gelding and leading a pack horse. He wore the same buckskin shirt as before, but his hair was freshly washed and his beard was neatly trimmed. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a shared understanding that this was a new beginning. Ready? He asked. Ready, she confirmed. Tom came out to see them off, giving Willow last-minute instructions and reminding Ryder of the destination. The mining camp was called Silver Summit, about 8 miles west and slightly north, past 2 creek crossings and through a narrow canyon. Should be back by mid-afternoon, Tom said. Be safe, both of you. They set out, Willow driving the wagon while Ryder rode alongside. The morning was cool and clear, perfect weather for travel. As they left Fairplay behind, Willow felt nervous excitement building in her chest. This was her chance to prove she could do this work, to be useful, to be more than just the girl who could not find her way home. Tell me about the route, Ryder said once they were on the trail. What do you know about where we are going? Silver Summit is a mining camp west of town. We are delivering supplies to the foreman there, a man named Richards. The camp has been producing well lately, so they are expanding operations and need regular deliveries. Good. Now look around. What do you see that is distinctive about this part of the trail? Willow studied their surroundings. There's a split rail fence along the left side, and that barn with the red door. Right, so when we come back this direction, what will you see? The barn with the red door and the fence. Good. Now, as we go, I'm going to point out landmarks. I'm not expecting you to memorize them all at once, but over time, you might start recognizing places. Even if you cannot track overall direction, maybe you can recognize specific spots. It was the most patient teaching Willow had ever experienced. Ryder did not mock when she failed to notice an obvious landmark or forgot something he had just mentioned. He simply pointed it out again, explained it differently, and moved on. By the time they reached the first creek crossing, Willow had started to relax into the journey. "This is Beaver Creek," Ryder said as they forded the shallow water. "It feeds into the main river south of town, flows year-round, so it is a reliable marker. If you are ever lost north of Fairplay and you find this creek, follow it downstream and you will eventually hit the main road." "Follow it downstream," Willow repeated. "How do I know which way is downstream?" "Water always flows downhill. Watch which direction the current moves. That is downstream." Such a simple thing, but no one had ever explained it to her quite that way before. They were always too busy laughing or expressing exasperation at her confusion. The second creek crossing was more challenging, with deeper water and slippery rocks. Ryder crossed first to test the depth, then guided Willow across carefully, calling out directions to avoid the worst spots. The wagon lurched and splashed, but they made it through without incident. "You handled that team well," Ryder commented as they continued on. "Not everyone can keep horses calm in running water." "They trust me," Willow said. "I have been working with this pair, Thunder and Lightning, for 2 years now. We understand each other." "Thunder and Lightning? My father named them. He thought it was funny since they are both so calm and steady." Ryder smiled at that. "Your father has a sense of humor." They passed through the narrow canyon Ryder had mentioned, high rock walls rising on either side, and then emerged into more open terrain. Ahead, Willow could see the mining camp, a cluster of rough buildings and tents surrounding the mouth of a large mine shaft. Men were moving around, working with equipment, hauling ore carts. It was a busy, prosperous operation. The foreman, Richards, was a barrel-chested man with a thick mustache and suspicious eyes. Those eyes lingered on Willow with obvious doubt. "Tom sent a girl to make deliveries now?" he asked, directing his question to Ryder rather than Willow herself. "Tom sent his daughter, who is perfectly capable of the work," Ryder replied evenly, "and I am here to ensure safe navigation. Long as the supplies arrive undamaged, I suppose I do not care who brings them." Richards gestured to some workers. "Unload her and check the inventory." Willow climbed down and began directing the unloading, checking items against her list and making sure everything was accounted for. She had learned this part of the business thoroughly, and she moved through it with confidence. When everything was verified, Richard signed the receipt and handed over payment. "Next delivery in 3 days," he said gruffly. "Same supplies, double the nails." "I will let my father know," Willow replied professionally. As they prepared to leave, one of the miners approached. He was young, maybe 25, with a cocky grin and wandering eyes. "Hey there, pretty lady. You need any company on the ride back to town? Might be dangerous for a woman alone." "She is not alone," Ryder said quietly, but there was steel beneath the words. He had dismounted and now stood next to the wagon, and his sheer size made the young miner take a step back. "Just being friendly," the miner muttered. "Be friendly somewhere else." The miner retreated, and Willow felt grateful for Ryder's presence. She had dealt with unwanted attention before, but there was something particularly unsettling about being in a remote camp full of men with no other women around. Having Ryder there, solid and protective, made all the difference. They set off back toward Fairplay, retracing their route. As they traveled, Ryder continued his patient teaching, pointing out landmarks from a different angle, explaining how the same features looked when approached from the opposite direction. "This is the hard part for most people," he said. "Things look different depending on which way you are traveling. That rock formation that looked like a face going west now just looks like a pile of stones going east." "So how do you keep track?" "Practice, mostly, and I try to look back over my shoulder every so often when I'm traveling somewhere new. That way I have seen the return route even before I need it." Willow tried that, turning in her seat to look at where they had been. It was disorienting, seeing the trail from that angle, but she could understand the value. They stopped beside Beaver Creek to water the horses and eat the lunch Willow had packed. Sitting on the creek bank, watching the water flow past, felt peaceful, comfortable, like they had been doing this for years rather than just hours. "Can I ask you something personal?" Willow ventured as she ate a piece of bread and cheese. Depends on the question. Why did you really offer to do this? You said you wanted extra income, but I do not think that is the whole reason. Ryder was quiet for a long moment, watching the creek. When I found you yesterday, broken wagon, obviously lost, you were not crying or panicking. You were trying to figure out what to do next. You had a weapon in your hands, ready to defend yourself if needed. You were scared, but not helpless. He looked at her. Most people would have fallen apart in that situation. You did not. That impressed me. I was terrified, Willow admitted. Being brave does not mean not being scared. It means doing what needs to be done, even when you are scared. He brushed crumbs from his hands. And maybe I was tired of being alone all the time. Maybe I saw a chance to do something useful, while also having a reason to be around another person, someone interesting. You think I am interesting? I think you are determined, capable, and honest about your limitations without letting them stop you. That is interesting. Willow felt warmth spread through her chest, and it had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. She looked at Ryder, really looked at him, seeing past the intimidating size and wild appearance to the thoughtful, kind man beneath. He met her gaze steadily, and something unspoken passed between them. They finished lunch and continued back to Fairplay, arriving in mid-afternoon just as predicted. Tom was pleased with the successful delivery and impressed with how smoothly things had gone. He paid Ryder his percentage and scheduled another delivery for 2 days later. Over the following weeks, a pattern developed. Willow and Ryder made deliveries 3 or 4 times a week to various mining camps, ranches, and settlements in the surrounding mountains. Each trip, Ryder taught her more about navigation, and each trip, Willow absorbed what she could while accepting that she would never have his natural sense of direction. But that was acceptable now because he was always there beside her. And somewhere along the way, their partnership became something more. It started with small things. Ryder bringing her a wildflower he had spotted beside the trail. Willow packing extra biscuits because she had learned he had a particular fondness for them. Conversations that stretched longer during their lunch breaks, covering everything from childhood memories to thoughts about the future. Moments when their hands brushed while working with the horses, and neither of them pulled away immediately. Willow found herself looking forward to their deliveries with an eagerness that had nothing to do with work. She thought about Ryder during her evenings at home, wondering what he was doing in his mountain cabin, whether he was thinking about her too. She noticed details about him that she had not seen at first, the way he always checked her wagon wheels before they set out, making sure she was safe. The careful way he spoke, choosing his words deliberately. The rare, beautiful smiles that transformed his whole face. And Ryder, for his part, found reasons to come to town more often. He would stop by the freight office to discuss routes or check on scheduled deliveries, but really, he just wanted to see Willow. He taught her about tracking animals and identifying edible plants. He carved her a small wooden compass, though they both knew she would not be able to use it properly, just because he wanted to make something for her. He started imagining a future that included her, wondering if she could be happy in his mountain cabin, if she would want that kind of life. One afternoon in early October, 6 weeks after they had started working together, they made a delivery to a ranch on the northern edge of the territory. The return journey was longer than usual, and dusk was falling by the time they were halfway back to Fairplay. "We are not going to make it back before full dark," Ryder observed, studying the fading light. "There's a line shack about 2 miles ahead. We can shelter there for the night, head back in the morning." "Is it safe?" Willow asked. "Safer than traveling these trails in pitch black. The shack is maintained by the ranchers in the area, left stocked for travelers. We can build a fire, have some protection from the cold." They reached the line shack just as the last light was fading from the sky. It was a small, rough structure, just one room with a fireplace, a couple of bunks, and shelves holding basic supplies. But it was solid and weatherproof, and soon Ryder had a fire going that warmed the space considerably. They prepared a simple meal from the supplies in the shack, supplemented by what Willow had packed. As they ate, sitting on the bunks facing each other across the small fire, the intimacy of the situation seemed to settle over both of them. Are you worried about what people will say?" Ryder asked quietly. "About us spending the night out here alone?" "People already talk," Willow said. "They have been gossiping about us since you started riding with me. Apparently, it is scandalous that I spend so much time with the mysterious mountain man. Does that bother you?" "Not as much as it probably should." She met his eyes across the fire. "Do you care what they say?" "I have not cared what people thought about me for a long time." He was quiet for a moment. "But I care about your reputation, about making things difficult for you." "Ryder." Willow set down her bowl and leaned forward. "The only thing that would make things difficult for me would be if you stopped riding with me. If you decided this was not worth the gossip or the time or whatever else. Everything else I can handle." "I am not going to stop." His voice was firm. "Unless you want me to. I do not want you to. Not ever." The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. Ryder stood and crossed the small space, sitting beside Willow on her bunk. Up close, his size was even more apparent, his broad shoulders blocking out the firelight. But Willow felt no fear, only anticipation. "Maurice." "I have been thinking about you every day," Ryder said quietly. "Every morning when I wake up, every evening when I'm alone. I think about your laugh, your determination, the way you talk to your horses like they are old friends. I think about how you trusted me that first night when you had no reason to, how you have never once made me feel like a strange hermit who does not belong around civilized people." "You are not strange," Willow whispered. "You are kind and patient and wonderful. I am a man who has killed, who has lived rough, who does not fit in any town or city. But when I am with you, I feel like maybe I could learn to belong somewhere again." "You belong with me," Willow said, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "You have belonged with me since that first night." Ryder reached up and cupped her face with one large, calloused hand. "Can I kiss you, Willow Foster?" "Yes," she breathed. "Please, yes." He kissed her carefully at first, like she was something precious that might break. But when Willow pressed closer and wrapped her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and real. She had never been kissed before, but it felt natural with Ryder. Felt right. His arms came around her, holding her close against his broad chest, and she felt safe and wanted and cherished all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ryder pressed his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he said roughly. "I might have been falling since I saw you standing there with that iron rod, ready to fight the whole wilderness if you had to." "I love you too," Willow replied, joy flooding through her. "I think I started loving you when you did not laugh, when you just offered to help, like it was the most natural thing in the world." They kissed again, softer this time, savoring the moment. Eventually, they settled on the bunk together, Willow tucked against Ryder's side with his arm around her. They stayed like that for hours, talking quietly, sharing dreams and fears, planning a future that seemed suddenly possible. "Will you marry me?" Ryder asked as the fire burned low. "I know it is fast, but I am not a young man anymore, and I do not see the point in waiting when I know what I want. I want you, Willow. Want to wake up beside you every morning, want to guide you through life, want to build something real together." "Yes," Willow said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They lay together until dawn, not sleeping, just holding each other and talking about everything and nothing. When the sun finally rose, they packed up the line shack, leaving it ready for the next travelers, and continued back to Fairplay. Tom Foster was waiting anxiously when they arrived, clearly relieved to see them safe. His relief turned to surprise when Ryder asked to speak with him privately. "Mr. Foster, I would like permission to marry your daughter," Ryder said directly. "I know I am not the man you probably imagined for her. I do not have much beyond a cabin and some land, and I spend most of my time in the wilderness. But I love Willow, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure she is safe and happy and knows she is valued." Tom looked at Ryder for a long moment, then at his daughter standing nearby. Whatever he saw on Willow's face must have convinced him, because he broke into a smile. "Ryder, you have proven yourself to be a good man these past weeks. Patient, reliable, and clearly devoted to my daughter's well-being. If Willow wants to marry you, you have my blessing." "I do want to marry him, Papa," Willow said, rushing over to hug her father. "More than anything." "Then I suppose we have a wedding to plan." The wedding took place 3 weeks later in late October in the small church at the center of Fairplay. The whole town turned out, curiosity about the mountain man and Tom Foster's daughter bringing even people who barely knew them. Willow wore a dress her mother had been married in, carefully preserved over the years, made of cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Ryder wore new clothes purchased for the occasion, dark trousers, a white shirt, and a black vest. He had trimmed his beard and tied back his hair, though nothing could make him look anything other than what he was, a big, rough man of the mountains. But when Willow walked down the aisle on her father's arm and saw Ryder waiting at the altar, his eyes full of love and wonder, she thought he was the most handsome man she had ever seen. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged vows written by the preacher, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges life brought. When Ryder slipped a simple gold band onto Willow's finger, and she did the same for him, it felt like a promise being sealed, a future being born. "I will always walk beside you," Ryder murmured as they were pronounced husband and wife. "No matter where you are or how lost you get, I will always find you and bring you home." "You are my home," Willow replied, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "You have been since that first night." They celebrated with a dinner at the hotel, paid for by Tom as his wedding gift. The whole town joined in the feast, eating and dancing and toasting the unusual couple. Some people were still skeptical, still thought Willow was making a mistake marrying a mountain man, but many had come to respect Ryder over the past weeks. He had proven himself reliable, honest, and completely devoted to Willow's safety and happiness. As evening fell, Ryder and Willow rode out to his cabin, which was now their cabin. Ryder had spent the past weeks preparing it for married life, building a larger bed, adding shelves and storage, even constructing a small addition that would serve as a workroom. He had tried to make it welcoming, comfortable, a real home rather than just a solitary man's shelter. Willow stood in the center of the cabin, turning slowly to take it all in, and felt peace settle over her. This place, remote and surrounded by wilderness she could never navigate alone, felt safe because Ryder was here. "What do you think?" he asked, watching her nervously. "Is it too rough? Too remote? I know it is not like living in town." "It is perfect," Willow said, turning to him with a smile. "It is exactly where I want to be." That night, they consummated their marriage, learning each other with gentle care and growing passion. Ryder was reverent with Willow, treating her like precious treasure, but she met him with equal fervor, discovering depths of desire and connection she had never imagined. They fell asleep tangled together in their marriage bed, completely content. The weeks and months that followed settled into a rhythm. Willow continued making deliveries with Ryder guiding her, but now their partnership had a different quality. They were not just partners in work, but in life, sharing everything. Willow learned to manage the cabin, keeping it clean and comfortable, preparing meals and tending to the small garden Ryder had started. Ryder continued his fur trapping and guiding work, but he also spent time improving their home, making it more secure and comfortable for the winter ahead. And every night, no matter how tired they were or what challenges the day had brought, they came together with love and gratitude for what they had found in each other. Winter in the Colorado high country was brutal. Snow fell deep, often trapping them in the cabin for days at a time. But Ryder had prepared well, with ample firewood, preserved food, and all the supplies they needed. Willow discovered she did not mind being snowed in because it meant more time with her husband, talking by the fire, reading together from his collection of books, making love beneath heavy quilts while wind howled outside. Delivery work slowed during the worst of winter, but Ryder found other ways to earn income. He taught Willow how to prepare furs properly, and she proved to have a knack for it. Together, they processed hides that sold for premium prices when Ryder took them to Denver in the spring. The combination of fur sales and their freight work provided enough income to live comfortably, with some left over to save. "I have been thinking," Ryder said one evening in late February as they sat by the fire, "about expanding the business. There are more people moving into this territory every year, more mining operations, more ranches. They all need supplies delivered. What if we hired another driver or two, bought another wagon? Your father could manage the scheduling, I could handle navigation and training, and you could oversee the actual deliveries. You want to grow the business?" Willow looked up from the shirt she was mending. "I think we could build something significant. Give people jobs, provide reliable service, make a real living." He reached over and took her hand. "And it would mean we could stay in this area permanently, make a real life here instead of just surviving season to season." "I love that idea," Willow said, squeezing his hand. "Let me talk to Papa about it. I think he would be excited about expanding." Spring came with dramatic suddenness, snow melting into rushing creeks, wildflowers bursting from the ground, and trails becoming passable again. Willow and Ryder made the trip to Fairplay to discuss the business expansion with Tom. Tom was enthusiastic about the idea, and together the three of them worked out details. They would hire 2 more drivers, both young men who needed work and were willing to learn. Ryder would teach them the trails and navigation, while Willow would train them on handling freight, customer relations, and managing the horses. They purchased a second wagon and team with money Tom had been saving for retirement, all of them agreeing it was a worthwhile investment. By summer, Foster Freight had expanded significantly. The business was thriving, with regular contracts to mining camps and ranches throughout the region. Tom handled the office work and scheduling. The two new drivers, Daniel and Marcus, managed many of the routine deliveries under Ryder's guidance, and Willow and Ryder took the more challenging or remote jobs. One afternoon in July, after returning from a delivery to a distant ranch, Willow realized she had missed her monthly courses. The second month confirmed what she suspected. She was carrying Ryder's child. She told him that evening, as they sat outside their cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "I am pregnant," she said simply, watching his face for reaction. Ryder went completely still, then turned to look at her with wonder in his green eyes. "Truly? Truly. We are going to have a baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly but carefully, like she might break. "I cannot believe it," he said roughly. "A child. Our child." "Are you happy?" Willow asked, though she could feel his joy in the way he held her. Happy does not begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her face. "I never thought I would have this. A wife, a home, a child. I thought I was going to spend my life alone on this mountain. Instead, you are stuck with me getting lost constantly and a baby who will probably inherit my sense of direction." Ryder laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Then I will guide both of you. Always." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Willow continued working, though they limited her to shorter routes and lighter loads as she grew larger. Ryder became increasingly protective, hovering and worrying until Willow had to remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time. "I know that," he would say, "but this is my wife and my child. I am allowed to worry." She gave birth in late March of 1877 in their cabin with a midwife from Fairplay attending. The labor was long and difficult, but Ryder stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. When their son finally arrived, squalling and perfect, Ryder wept openly. "A boy," the midwife announced, wrapping the baby in clean blankets. "A healthy boy." They named him Thomas after Willow's father, but called him Tommy. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's gray-blue eyes, and from the moment he was born, he owned both his parents completely. Ryder proved to be a devoted father, gentle despite his size and rough life. He would sit for hours holding Tommy, singing quietly or just watching him sleep with wonder. As Tommy grew, Ryder taught him about the mountains, about tracking in animals and respecting the wilderness. And when Tommy started walking, they discovered he had inherited his mother's complete lack of sense of direction. "He will wander off in the cabin and somehow end up confused about which door leads outside," Willow said with a mixture of exasperation and amusement when Tommy was 2 years old. "At least I come by it honestly now. It is clearly inherited." "Then we will teach him the same way I taught you," Ryder said, watching Tommy examine a rock with intense concentration. "We will give him strategies, keep him safe, and never make him feel less for something he cannot control." 2 years later, Willow gave birth to twin girls, Rose and Lily, who had their father's green eyes and their mother's blonde hair. The cabin suddenly felt very full and very loud, and Ryder began planning an expansion to give them more space. The freight business continued to thrive and grow. Tom eventually retired, turning full management over to Willow and Ryder while staying on as an advisor. They hired more drivers, purchased more wagons, and established regular routes throughout the territory. Foster Freight became known as the most reliable delivery service in the area, and much of that reputation was due to Ryder's navigational expertise and Willow's careful management. But no matter how busy life became, Willow and Ryder always made time for each other. They still rode deliveries together sometimes, just the two of them, leaving the children with Tom or one of the trusted employees. Those trips felt like echoing that first journey they had made together, when everything was new and uncertain and full of possibility. One evening, when they had been married for 8 years and were sitting outside watching their children play in the yard, Willow reflected on how much had changed. "Do you remember that first night?" she asked Ryder. "When you found me lost with my broken wagon?" "Every detail," he replied. "You standing there with that iron rod ready to fight whatever came out of the woods, scared but determined. I never thanked you properly. For not laughing. For seeing me as more than just the girl who cannot find her way." Ryder took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle. You never needed to thank me. You gave me everything, Willow. Purpose, love, family. A reason to come down from my mountain and be part of the world again. If anything, I should spend every day thanking you. We saved each other, Willow said softly. I think that is how the best love stories work. Then ours must be the best, Ryder agreed, pulling her close. Their children grew and thrived. Tommy eventually learned to manage his navigation problems the same way his mother had, by accepting his limitations and always traveling with someone who could guide him. He became an excellent horseman and took over much of the delivery work as he grew older. The twins, thankfully, had inherited their father's sense of direction and could navigate the mountain trails with confidence. In 1885, when Willow was 29 and Ryder 37, they welcomed their fourth child, another boy they named Samuel. By then, Foster Freight had become one of the largest freight operations in Colorado Territory, with offices in multiple towns and over a dozen wagons operating regular routes. But success never changed the fundamental truth of Willow and Ryder's relationship. He still guided her on every journey, still made sure she never had to worry about finding her way alone, and she still provided him with the love, acceptance, and home he had thought he would never have. As the years passed and Colorado transitioned from territory to state in 1876, their life continued to evolve. The children grew into adults with their own dreams and paths. Tommy took over the freight business entirely when he was 25, proving to have inherited both his mother's management skills and his father's dedication to the work. The twins both married local men and started families of their own, staying close to home. Samuel showed an interest in becoming a doctor and headed east for medical school, but he always came back to Colorado for visits. Willow and Ryder gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the business, though they never fully retired. They spent more time at their mountain cabin, which Ryder had expanded and improved over the years into a substantial, comfortable home. They traveled some, visiting Denver and other cities, but always returned to their mountains. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1896, Tom Foster passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74. His death was a profound loss for Willow, but she found comfort in knowing he had lived to see her happy, successful, and surrounded by family. They buried him in the Fairplay Cemetery with a headstone that read, Thomas Foster, beloved father and friend, who built a legacy of honest work and good character. After the funeral, as Willow and Ryder walked back toward their wagon, she stumbled slightly on the uneven ground. Ryder immediately steadied her, his hand firm on her elbow. I have got you, he said automatically, the same thing he had said thousands of times over their 20 years together. I know, Willow replied, leaning into his strength. You always do. They lived to see the turn of the century, watching the world change in ways they could never have imagined when they first met. Automobiles appeared on some roads, though the mountain trails still required horses. Electricity came to Fairplay, though they kept their cabin lit by lanterns and firelight. The wilderness they loved was slowly being tamed, but there were still places wild and remote where a person could lose themselves if they did not know the way. Willow never did develop a sense of direction. Even in her 60s, she could get turned around in her own yard if she was not paying attention, but it did not matter because Ryder was always there, patient and steady, ready to point her the right way. One summer evening, when they were both in their 70s, they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset behind the mountains. Their children were grown with children of their own. The freight business was thriving under Tommy's management. They had lived full, rich lives, built something meaningful together. Do you ever regret it? Willow asked quietly. Giving up your solitary life for all this chaos? Ryder looked at her, this woman he had loved for over 40 years, and smiled. Not for a single moment. Every direction I went before I met you was just wandering. You gave me a destination worth reaching. Even though you have had to guide me every step of the way, especially because of that. He took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. Remember what I told you that first night? That everyone has different strengths? I spent 8 years alone on this mountain before I understood that my strength was not just surviving alone. It was being there for someone who needed me. You needed me, Willow, and it turned out I needed you just as much. They laughed when they heard I could not find my way, Willow said, remembering all those voices from decades past, called me foolish, said I would never be able to manage. And I said I would always walk beside you, Ryder replied. That was the easiest promise I ever made because it was exactly what I wanted to do anyway. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began to emerge in the vast Colorado sky. Somewhere in the valley below, lights were appearing in Fairplay as families lit their evening lamps. Their own grandchildren were likely being tucked into bed, safe and loved. The world they had built together through patience and love and unwavering commitment stretched out around them. Willow Foster had been lost when Ryder Thorne found her, in more ways than just directional. She had been lost in self-doubt, lost in others' expectations, lost in believing that her weakness defined her. But Ryder had seen past all that to the strong, capable woman beneath, and he had offered not just guidance, but partnership, not just help, but love. And Ryder, for all his strength and survival skills, had been lost too. Lost in isolation, lost in believing he did not fit anywhere, lost in thinking his rough life meant he did not deserve softness or connection. But Willow had welcomed him exactly as he was, had built a life with him that honored both his need for wilderness and his need for belonging. They had saved each other, guided each other, and loved each other through everything life brought. Direction might have been Willow's challenge, but love had always been her compass, pointing true to the man beside her. Ryder Thorne died peacefully in the winter of 1905 at the age of 57, his heart simply giving out one night as he slept beside the woman he loved. Willow woke to find him gone, and though the grief was crushing, she also felt profound gratitude. They had been given nearly 30 years together, had built a family and a life, had loved each other completely. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren who made sure she never had to navigate anywhere alone. When she passed in 1910 at the age of 54, peacefully in her sleep in the cabin she and Ryder had shared, her family buried her beside him in the Fairplay Cemetery. Their headstone was simple but meaningful. Ryder Thorne and Willow Foster. Thorne. He guided her through every wilderness, she guided him home. Together, they never lost their way. And beneath, added by their children. True love is not about finding someone who makes the journey easy. It is about finding someone who will walk beside you no matter how hard the path becomes. The freight business they built continued for another 3 generations, always keeping the name Foster Freight in honor of the man who started it and the daughter who expanded it. And among the family, passed down through stories told to each new generation, was the tale of how it all began. With a woman who could not find her way, a mountain man who could, and a love that proved some people are not lost at all. They are just waiting for the right person to walk beside them. In the end, Willow Foster never did learn to navigate on her own. But she learned something far more valuable, that asking for help is not weakness, that accepting your limitations does not limit your life, and that the right partner will not try to fix you but will simply walk beside you, ready to guide you home whenever you need it. And Ryder Thorne, the man who had spent 8 years alone on a mountain, learned that strength is not about facing the wilderness alone. It is about choosing to share your path with someone who makes every step worthwhile, even if it means taking the long way home. Their story became legend in Fairplay, told and retold until the details blurred, but the heart remained clear. She could not find her way. He said he would always walk beside her, and that promise, kept faithfully for 30 years, became the foundation for a love that guided them both through life's wilderness to exactly where they needed to be. Together. Always together.